The floating bazaar of Jar-Ul hung suspended in the magnetosphere like a jeweled pendant against the cosmic void. Dr. Mara Novik pressed herself against the railing of the observation platform, watching the kaleidoscope of life below with the practiced eye of a xenopsychologist. Bioluminescent flora pulsed in rhythm with the planet's magnetic field, casting dancing shadows across vendors, hawking everything from crystallized memories to bottled gravity. The air itself seemed alive with possibility, charged particles creating miniature auroras that swirled between the towering crystal spires. Mara's fingers unconsciously traced the scar along her left temple, a reminder of humanity's near extinction. She had been 12 when the Vorthan Empire descended upon Earth's colonies, leaving only scattered survivors to bear witness to their species' resilience. Now, 20 years later, she stood as one of the Galactic Council's foremost experts on predator psychology, driven by a belief that understanding could transform even the most fearsome hunters into potential allies. The crowd below represented dozens of species, their forms ranging from the ethereal luminari, who drifted like living smoke, to the heavily armored Krex merchants whose exoskeletons clicked with each movement. Energy shields hummed above spice stalls, while ancient sky sails, relics from before the Great Convergence, drifted lazily between platforms. The mingling of technology and tradition created a sensory symphony that never failed to captivate Mara's analytical mind. She adjusted her neural scanner, preparing to record behavioral patterns for her latest research paper on interspecies threat assessment. The device chirped softly, indicating optimal recording conditions. Below, a group of Nexari younglings played a game of gravity tag, their laughter carrying on the magnetized air currents. An elderly Quellian fortune-teller waved crystalline tendrils at passing customers, promising glimpses of possible futures. The normalcy of it all felt almost surreal after the chaos of her recent expedition to the Outer Rim. Then the temperature seemed to drop. A ripple of unease passed through the crowd like a stone disturbing still water. Conversations faltered. Children instinctively moved closer to their guardians. Even the ever-present hum of commerce seemed to dim. Mara's scanner spiked with readings of elevated stress hormones across multiple species. She knew the cause before she saw it. The Scar Thule emerged from the shadow of a cargo transport, its form a masterpiece of evolutionary perfection. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, the predator's chameleon skin shifted through patterns of deep purple and obsidian black, adapting to the bazaar's shifting light. Its elongated skull housed 6 eyes, arranged in perfect hunting formation, each capable of tracking different prey simultaneously. Retractable claws clicked against the metal walkway with each measured step. Mara's breath caught. She had studied the Scar Thule extensively through archived footage and second-hand accounts, but witnessing one in person was an entirely different experience. Every movement spoke of calculated lethality, from the way its tail counterbalanced each step to the subtle expansion and contraction of its chest-mounted sensor organs. This was a creature that had evolved over millions of years for a single purpose: the perfect kill. The predator's scanning lights activated, casting geometric patterns across the crowd as it searched for optimal prey. The beams were more than simple illumination. They read heat signatures, analyzed movement patterns, and detected the subtle bioelectric fields that betrayed fear or weakness. A young Polarian merchant fumbled with his credit chips, the spike in his anxiety clearly visible in the scanner's display. An aging Threnody matriarch struggled with her hover chair controls, her life force flickering like a candle in the wind. Both registered as potential targets in the predator's assessment matrix. Mara's training kicked in. She activated her recorder, documenting every nuance of the Scar Thule's hunting behavior. The way it tilted its head to triangulate sound sources. The micro-adjustments in its stance that preceded each scan. The rhythmic dilation of its secondary nostrils as it sampled the air's chemical composition. This was invaluable data for understanding predator psychology and potentially preventing future attacks. The scanning beam swept closer to her position, methodically cataloging each life form. When they reached the observation platform, Mara felt the light pass over her like a physical touch. For a moment, she experienced the unsettling sensation of being truly seen. Not just observed, but fundamentally understood on a biological level. Her human signature, unique among the assembled species, blazed in the scanner's perception. The Scar Thul's reaction was immediate and shocking. All 6 eyes snapped to focus on her position. Its body went rigid, muscles tensing beneath its color-shifting skin. The predator's crest, normally laid flat against its skull, erected to full display in what xenobiologists recognized as an extreme threat response. But instead of attacking, the creature took a step backward, then another. The mighty Scar Thul, terror of a dozen systems, was retreating. Whispers erupted through the crowd like wildfire. Impossible, someone breathed in galactic standard. Scar Thul never retreat. Another voice, trembling with a mixture of awe and fear. The human. It fears the human. The word spread, carried on 100 tongues in a dozen languages. Human, the extinct ones, the lost species, here, now, feared by the ultimate predator. Mara remained frozen, her scientific mind racing to process what she had witnessed. Scar Thul behavioral models indicated they only retreated from superior predators or overwhelming force. She was neither, at barely 1.6 meters tall and lacking any natural weapons. She represented no physical threat to a creature that could tear through military-grade armor with its bare claws. Yet, the evidence was undeniable. The predator had scanned her, recognized her as human, and chosen retreat over engagement. The Scar Thul melted back into the shadows between market stalls, its camouflage rendering it nearly invisible. But Mara could still feel its presence, a weight in the air that made her skin prickle. It hadn't fled entirely. It was waiting, watching, processing this unprecedented encounter with the same analytical intensity she brought to her own observations. As the normal rhythm of the bazaar slowly reasserted itself, Mara found herself the center of attention. Dozens of eyes, compound and simple, mechanical and organic, turned in her direction. She could read the questions in their gazes. What power did humans possess that even the Scar Thul feared? Why had this predator, which had never shown mercy or hesitation, backed away from a member of a supposedly extinct species? Her communicator buzzed with incoming messages. The Galactic Council's Xenobiology Department, the Predator Response Initiative, even the mysterious Concordance of Minds. Word was spreading beyond the bazaar, rippling out through quantum networks and telepathic links. The impossible had happened, and everyone wanted to understand why. Mara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her species' legacy settling on her shoulders. Earth might be gone, its biosphere reduced to ash and memory. But humanity lived on in scattered survivors like herself. They carried more than just genetic material. They bore the accumulated wisdom of a species that had faced its own predatory nature and chosen a different path. Perhaps that choice, that fundamental rewiring of instinct, was what the Scar Thul had sensed. She opened her eyes to find Alex standing beside her. The Morteki information broker's crystalline form refracted the bazaar's lights into prismatic patterns, but concern was evident in the way his harmonic frequencies modulated. "Dr. Novik," he resonated, his voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I have maintained surveillance on the Scar Thul. It has taken position in the lower market. It watches. It waits." "Thank you, Alex." Mara's voice was steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. "Can you arrange a meeting with the Council of Scholars? We need to understand what just happened before anyone else gets hurt." "Already in progress," Alex assured her. "But Doctor, I must warn you. The bazaar's attention is now fixed upon you. Some see opportunity, others, threat. The Predator's reaction has marked you as significant." Mara nodded. understanding the implications. In a universe where power dynamics shifted like sand, being marked as significant could be both blessing and curse. She gathered her equipment, mind already formulating hypotheses about the Scar Thul's behavior. Each theory led to more questions, a cascading complexity that would require careful investigation. As she made her way toward the council chambers, the crowd parted before her with newfound respect and wariness. Conversations halted mid-sentence. Children peered from behind their guardians' forms. Even the aggressive Rex security forces stepped aside without challenge. The human who had made a Scar Thul retreat was no longer just another researcher in the floating bazaar. She had become something else, a mystery that demanded solving. The council chambers occupied a crystalline dome at the bazaar's apex, its walls grown from living mineral that resonated with the planet's magnetic field. As Mara entered, she found the assembled scholars already deep in debate. The Pelarian archive keeper's tentacles waved in agitation while the twin Gorvac analysts projected competing probability matrices into the air. At the chamber's center, Elder Thane, a being so ancient his species was forgotten, regarded her with eyes that had witnessed the birth and death of stars. Dr. Novik, Elder Thane's voice carried the weight of eons. Your presence has created quite the disturbance in our carefully balanced ecosystem. A Scar Thul retreating from prey is unprecedented. The implications ripple beyond this bazaar, beyond this system. Tell us, what did you do? That's what I'm hoping we can determine together, Mara replied. Taking her place at the analysis podium, she uploaded her scanner data to the central display. The Scar Thul's biometric readings cascading across the dome's surface. I did nothing beyond existing. The predator's reaction was entirely based on recognizing my species' signature. The Gorvac twins synchronized their speech, an eerie harmony that never failed to unsettle. Statistical probability of Scar Thul retreat, 0.03%. Historical precedent? None. Hypothesis. Unknown factor in human biology triggers predator avoidance response. But what factor? The archive keeper's chromatic skin shifted through patterns of academic frustration. Humans possess no natural defenses against predation, no venom, no armor, minimal physical strength relative to galactic norms. Their survival strategy relied entirely on tool use and social cooperation. Perhaps that's precisely the point, Mara suggested, her fingers dancing across the holographic interface to highlight specific readings. Look at the predator's neural activity at the moment of recognition. These patterns indicate not just surprise, but something approaching. Recognition, fear. The emotional signatures are complex. Elder Thane leaned forward, his ancient form creaking like old wood. You speak of emotional signatures as if the Scar Thul experience emotion as we understand it. They are pure predators. Doctor, their neural architecture supports hunting, killing, and survival. Nothing more. With respect, Elder. That's what we assumed. Mara pulled up her doctoral thesis. Years of research condensed into elegant visualizations. My work suggests that even the most specialized predators retain vestigial emotional capacity. It's simply expressed differently than in prey or social species. The Scar Thul's reaction suggests it recognized something in humanity that triggered these dormant pathways. The debate continued for hours, theories proposed and discarded with scholarly precision. Some suggested humanity possessed a pheromonal defense mechanism evolved during their violent prehistory. Others hypothesized that human neural patterns created disruptive resonance in predator species hunting algorithms. The Gorvac twins calculated probability matrices until their shared consciousness threatened to overheat. It was the archive keeper who finally asked the crucial question. Dr. Novik, you mentioned your scanner detected the Scar Thul's presence before visual confirmation. How? Mara paused, considering. Standard threat detection. Elevated stress hormones in the crowd, behavioral pattern shifts, temperature variations. She trailed off, realization dawning. Wait, I felt it. Before any of those indicators registered, I felt the predator's presence. Explain, Elder Thane commanded. It's difficult to articulate. Mara searched for words to describe the sensation. Like pressure in the air before a storm. A wrongness that made my skin crawl. I've experienced it before, during the Vorthan attacks. This sense that I was being evaluated as prey. The chamber fell silent. The implications hung heavy in the recycled air. If humans could instinctively detect predatory intent, and if predators could somehow sense this detection. A feedback loop, the Gorvak twins whispered in unison. Predator senses prey. Prey senses predator sensing prey. Predator senses prey sensing predator sensing prey. Recursive awareness building to paralysis. Mara finished. The hunting algorithm breaks down when faced with prey that's aware of being hunted on a fundamental level. It's not fear the Scar Thul experienced. It's confusion. Uncertainty. The one thing a perfect predator cannot tolerate. Elder Thane's eyes glittered with ancient wisdom. You propose that humanity evolved not physical defenses against predation, but cognitive ones. That your species' survival against your own predatory instincts created a neural pattern that disrupts other predators' hunting sequences. It would explain why the Vorthans targeted human colonies so systematically. Mara said, the pieces falling into place. They weren't just eliminating a potential threat. They were removing a disruptive element from the galactic ecosystem, a species that made predators uncomfortable. The discussion might have continued indefinitely, but Alex's crystalline form suddenly blazed with urgent light. Doctors, we have a situation. The Scar Thul is moving, and it's not alone. The central display shifted to show surveillance feeds from throughout the bazaar. The original Scar Thul had been joined by two others, their forms shifting through camouflage patterns as they moved with coordinated purpose through the lower markets. But most disturbing was their destination. They were converging on the council chambers. Evacuation protocol, Elder Thane ordered, but Mara raised a hand. No. If they wanted to attack, they wouldn't announce their presence so obviously. They're investigating. Just like we are. She turned to Alex. Can you establish communication? Scar Thul do not communicate with prey species. The archive keeper protested. It's fundamental to their psychology. To acknowledge prey as worthy of communication would break their conceptual framework. Mara interrupted. Exactly what happened when one encountered a human. They need to understand as much as we do. She looked around the chamber at her colleagues' skeptical faces. This is an opportunity. When has anyone had the chance to engage with Scar Thul in a non-predatory context? Elder Thane's expression was unreadable. You would risk your life on an untested theory. I've risked it on less. Mara's fingers unconsciously traced her scar again. If I'm right, this could change our understanding of predator-prey dynamics throughout the galaxy. If I'm wrong, she shrugged. Then we learn that empirically too. The council exchanged glances, generations of academic caution warring with scientific curiosity. Finally, Elder Thane nodded slowly. Very well, Dr. Novik. But we implement full security protocols at the first sign of aggression. Understood. Mara was already moving toward the chamber's exit. Alex, can you modulate a translation matrix for Scar Thul bioacoustic patterns? Theoretical framework exists, the information broker confirmed, his crystalline form pulsing with rapid calculations. Practical application untested. Success probability unknown. Then we're in familiar territory. Mara paused at the threshold, looking back at the assembled scholars. Science is about pushing into the unknown. Today, we push a little harder. The descent to the lower markets felt like traveling through layers of civilization. Each level down brought rougher crowds, more desperate trades, shadier dealings. By the time Mara reached the designated coordinates, the polished surfaces and elegant architecture of the upper bazaar had given way to rust-streaked metal and flickering illumination. The air tasted of ozone and desperation. The three Scar-Thul waited in what had once been a cargo bay, now converted into an impromptu meeting ground. They stood in perfect triangular formation, their combined presence making the space feel impossibly small. Up close, Mara could see the differences between individuals, scars that told stories of successful hunts, variations in crest shape that might indicate age or status, subtle differences in coloration that her human eyes could barely perceive. "Dr. Mara Novik," she said, keeping her voice steady and her movements slow. "I understand you wish to communicate." The central Scar-Thul, the one from the initial encounter, produced a sound like grinding metal passed through a synthesizer. Alex's translation matrix struggled, producing fragmented concepts. Wrong prey, broken pattern, explain necessity. "You want to understand why I disrupted your hunting sequence?" Mara interpreted. "The simple answer is that I didn't do it intentionally. The complex answer, may I show you?" She slowly reached for her neural interface, making each movement deliberate and non-threatening. The Scar-Thul tensed but didn't attack. When she activated the device, it projected her memories into the space between them. Earth's final days. The Vorthan ships descending like metallic locusts. The desperate evacuation attempts. The moment she realized her parents weren't going to make it to the transport. But she didn't stop there. She showed them humanity's history. The long climb from prey animals on the African savanna, the development of empathy and cooperation as survival strategies, the gradual recognition that the greatest predator humanity faced was itself. She showed them wars and reconciliations, the building of civilizations and the choice, made again and again, to be more than mere hunters. The Scar-Thul remained motionless throughout the presentation, but their biosignatures told a different story. Neural activity spiked in regions their own scientists had declared vestigial. Chemical markers associated with stress and confusion flooded their systems. When the memory projection ended, the silence stretched between species like a bridge over an evolutionary chasm. Finally, the central Scar-Thul moved, not to attack, but to activate its own bioprojection system. The images were alien, filtered through senses Mara couldn't fully comprehend. But the emotional core was unmistakable. She saw the Scar-Thul homeworld before the great extinction event that had forced their evolution toward pure predation. She saw complex social structures, art forms based on light and movement, achievements beyond mere survival. And she saw the choice they had made when faced with extinction, to become the perfect hunters, sacrificing everything else for survival. "We are mirrors," Alex translated, his voice filled with wonder. "Opposite choices, same catalyst. You chose complexity. We chose simplicity. Both survived. Both lost." Mara felt tears on her cheeks, surprising herself. The weight of two species' tragedies hung in the air between them. "Yes," she whispered. "We are what you might have been. You are what we could have become." The Scar-Thul's next vocalization was different, almost mournful. Human pattern disrupts because it shows alternative, not prey, not predator. Something else, something forgotten. "Not forgotten," Mara said firmly. "Dormant. You proved that today. A pure predator would have attacked regardless of confusion. You chose to understand. That's not predator behavior." The three Scar-Thul exchanged looks, their biocommunication creating patterns Mara's equipment couldn't fully decode. When they turned back to her, their postures had subtly shifted. Still dangerous, Still alien, but somehow less rigidly predatory. This knowledge spreads. Alex translated. Others will come. Questions multiply. Some will not accept. Danger increases. Mara understood. By breaking the Scar Thul's conceptual framework, she had potentially destabilized their entire social structure. Some would adapt, evolving beyond pure predation. Others would see this as a threat to their identity, responding with violence. The ripple effects would spread far beyond this bazaar. Then we face that together, she said. Your species and what remains of mine. We've both been defined by our responses to extinction. Maybe it's time to choose new definitions. The central scar. Thul reached into a pouch integrated into its bio-armor, extracting something that caught the failing light. A feather, but unlike any Mara had seen. It shifted through spectrums visible and invisible, its structure both organic and crystalline. The predator extended it toward her with movements that spoke of ceremony and significance. Recognition marker, Alex translated, his tone reverent. Scar Thul do not give, Scar Thul take. This is unprecedented. Mara accepted the feather with equal ceremony, understanding the weight of the gesture. In Scar Thul culture, taking trophies from prey was fundamental. To give something, especially to what should have been prey, represented a cognitive shift as profound as any in their evolutionary history. Thank you, she said simply. I'll carry it with honor. The Scar Thul departed without another sound, their forms melting back into the shadows of the lower market. But Mara could feel the change they left behind, a shift in the station's atmospheric pressure that had nothing to do with life support systems. Word would spread. Debates would rage. Some species would celebrate the possibility of predators evolving beyond their nature. Others would see it as a threat to the established order. Alex's crystalline form chimed softly. Doctor, I'm receiving multiple communication requests. The Galactic Council wishes immediate briefing. Several predator species demand explanation. Even the Concordance of Minds expresses interest. Let them wait, Mara said, exhaustion suddenly weighing on her. We've just witnessed something that challenges millions of years of evolution. I need time to process, to understand what comes next. They made their way back to the upper levels in contemplative silence. The bazaar's crowd seemed different now, the divide between predator and prey less absolute. Mara noticed subtle changes, a Vrex guard helping an elderly Polarian with her packages, a group of mixed-species children playing together without the usual segregation, conversations that bridged previously unbridgeable gaps. Change, Mara reflected, often began with a single impossible moment. Her quarters were modest but comfortable, a benefit of her position with the council. As she settled into her meditation chair, the Scar Thul feather resting on the table before her, she found her thoughts drifting to her parents. They had been xenobiologists, too, devoted to the belief that understanding could overcome any barrier. Their final transmission, sent as the Vorthan weapons charged, had been typically them. Remember, Mara, fear is just evolution's way of keeping us safe. But we're more than our evolution now. A soft chime announced a visitor. Mara wasn't surprised to find another human at her door. Dr. Yuki Tanaka looked tired, older than her 60 years, but her eyes held the same sharp intelligence that had made her humanity's leading expert on interspecies conflict resolution. Mara, she said without preamble, I've been monitoring the situation. Do you understand what you've started? A conversation that was long overdue? Mara suggested, gesturing for her colleague to enter. Yuki settled into the opposite chair with a sigh. The Scar Thul aren't the only predator species questioning their nature tonight. I've had reports from 17 systems, hunting packs abandoning prey mid-stalk, predator species attempting communication with former food sources. The natural order, if we can call it that, is experiencing a crisis. or an evolution, Mara countered. The natural order has never been as rigid as we pretended. Symbiosis, cooperation, even altruism, they're all part of nature too. We just focused on the violent parts because they were more dramatic. Yuki's expression was skeptical. And when the backlash comes? When the predator species that refuse to evolve decide humanity is a threat to their existence? We're already nearly extinct. Mara, can we survive becoming the galaxy's most wanted? It was a fair question. Mara turned the Scar Thule feather in her hands, watching it shift through impossible colors. Maybe survival isn't the only metric that matters anymore. We've been so focused on not going extinct that we forgot to ask what we're surviving for. Spoken like someone who didn't watch Earth burn, Yuki said sharply, then softened. I'm sorry. That was unfair. You lost as much as any of us. We all carry our scars, Mara acknowledged. But at some point, we have to decide whether we're going to be defined by our wounds or our healing. Today, a species that perfected killing chose understanding instead. If they can evolve beyond their trauma, maybe we can too. Yuki was quiet for a long moment. Then, the council is convening an emergency session. They want you to present your findings to the full assembly. Every member species will be watching. No pressure. When? Tomorrow. You'll have the galaxy's attention. Mara, what will you tell them? Mara looked at the feather again, remembering the weight of recognition in the Scar Thule's 6 eyes. The truth, that we're all more than our programming. That evolution didn't stop when we achieved spaceflight. That maybe, just maybe, the next great leap isn't technological but psychological. Philosophical poetry won't stop a plasma bolt, Yuki warned. No, Mara agreed. But it might prevent one from being fired in the first place. After Yuki left, Mara spent hours preparing her presentation. She compiled data, crafted arguments, anticipated objections. But her mind kept returning to that moment of mutual recognition between species separated by millions of years of divergent evolution. In that instant, predator and prey had become something else. 2 traumatized species recognizing their shared pain. Her communication system chimed with an encrypted message. The sender was anonymous, but the biosignature was unmistakably Scar Thule. The message was simple. Others resist. Danger comes. Be ready. Mara smiled grimly. Change was never easy, and those who benefited from the status quo would fight to preserve it. But the seed had been planted. Across the galaxy, predators were questioning their nature, and prey were recognizing their own power. The rigid categories that had defined interspecies relations for millennia were blurring. She entered her sleeping alcove but found rest elusive. Through her viewport, the floating bazaar glittered against the cosmic backdrop, a jewel of diversity and commerce. Somewhere in those twisting corridors and crowded markets, Scar Thule walked among other species without hunting. It was a small change, barely noticeable in the grand scheme of galactic civilization, but revolutions often began with single, impossible moments. Morning came too quickly. Mara dressed in her formal council attire, the Scar Thule feather attached to her collar as both evidence and symbol. The council chambers were packed beyond capacity. Representatives from every member species crammed into spaces designed for half their number. The air hummed with tension and anticipation. Elder Thane called the session to order, his ancient voice somehow carrying over the crowd's murmur. We gather to address an unprecedented event. Dr. Mara Novik, the floor is yours. Mara stepped to the central podium, feeling the weight of thousands of eyes upon her. She took a breath, centered herself, and began. Esteemed colleagues, yesterday I experienced something that challenges our fundamental understanding of predator-prey dynamics. But to understand what happened, we must first acknowledge some uncomfortable truths about our own assumptions. She activated the holographic display, showing the standard predator-prey classification system used throughout Council space. We've organized the galaxy into neat categories. Predators here, prey there, with various gradients between. It's comfortable, predictable, and fundamentally wrong. Murmurs of protest rippled through the assembly. Mara continued before they could solidify into objections. Every species in this room has, at some point in its evolution, been both predator and prey. We've hunted and been hunted. We've killed to survive and cooperated to thrive. The rigid categories we cling to are recent inventions, psychological comfort blankets that help us make sense of a complex universe. She shifted the display to show her encounter with the Scar Thul, the biometric data painting a clear picture of the predator's unprecedented retreat. When this Scar Thul encountered a human, its hunting algorithm failed. Not because humans are superior predators or possess some secret defense, but because we represent a paradox its simplified worldview couldn't process. You speak of simplified worldviews, interrupted Representative Korax of the Vreni Confederation. Yet the Scar Thul have survived for millions of years with their approach. Who are we to judge their evolution? I'm not judging, Mara replied calmly. I'm observing. The Scar Thul made a choice in response to extinction pressure. Become perfect predators by sacrificing cognitive complexity. Humanity faced similar pressure and chose differently. Maintain complexity at the cost of physical superiority. Neither choice is inherently superior. But when these two strategies collided yesterday, something remarkable happened. She played the translation of her communication with the three Scar Thul, letting the assembly hear the predator's own words about mirrors and forgotten paths. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Scar Thul recognized in humanity not prey, not threat, but possibility, a path they had abandoned but not forgotten, and in that recognition they chose to evolve, not physically, but psychologically. They chose understanding over instinct. Dangerous precedent, growled Admiral Thex of the warrior caste. If predators abandon their nature, ecological balance collapses, chaos follows. Does it? Mara challenged. Or does new balance emerge? Throughout history, what we call civilization has been the gradual expansion of who we consider worthy of moral consideration. First family, then tribe, then species, then allies. Each expansion was prophesied to bring chaos. Each time, we adapted and thrived. She brought up statistical models prepared overnight with Yuki's help. These projections show multiple possible futures. Yes, some involve short-term instability as predator species grapple with evolving beyond pure hunting behavior. But long-term models show decreased interspecies conflict, increased cooperation, and accelerated technological and social development. The chaos Admiral Thex fears is actually evolution in action. Pretty theories, scoffed Counselor Vriss, her scales rattling with agitation. But theories don't stop claws and teeth. When rogue predators come for human survivors, blaming them for disrupting the natural order, will your philosophy protect them? No, Mara admitted. But hiding and hoping to be overlooked hasn't protected us either. We've spent decades trying to be invisible, to not disturb the galactic balance. Where has that gotten us? Near extinction, scattered refugees, constantly looking over our shoulders. Maybe it's time to try something different. She paused, gathering her thoughts for the crucial argument. What happened yesterday wasn't an anomaly. It's happened before, on smaller scales, unreported and unexamined. Predator species encountering humans and experiencing cognitive disruption. We've dismissed these incidents as malfunctions or misunderstandings. But what if they're evolution knocking at the door? Elder Thane leaned forward. You propose we actively encourage this disruption? Deliberately destabilize predator species' psychological frameworks? I propose we stop hiding what we are, Mara said firmly. Humans evolved empathy and cooperation, not despite our predatory heritage, but because of it. We looked at what we were capable of and chose to be more. That choice, encoded in our neural patterns, reminds other predators that they have choices too. We don't disrupt them. We remind them of possibilities they've suppressed. The debate that followed was fierce. Representatives argued about ecological niches, evolutionary pressure, the sanctity of natural development. Some saw opportunity in Mara's vision of predators evolving beyond pure hunting behavior. Others saw only danger and chaos. The session stretched for hours, voices raised in passionate advocacy for their positions. It was the unexpected arrival of a Scar Thul delegation that shifted the debate's tone. 3 individuals, not the same ones from yesterday, but bearing similar recognition markers, entered the chamber with none of their species' typical hunting posture. They moved carefully, deliberately, broadcasting non-aggression through every gesture. "We speak," their designated communicator managed through a hastily assembled translation matrix. First time Scar Thul addressed Pray Not Prey. Difficult, necessary. The assembly held its collective breath. A predator species voluntarily engaging in diplomatic communication was unprecedented. Human pattern spreads through Scar Thul consciousness. The speaker continued. Some resist. Call it corruption, disease. Others, curious. Remember before time. When Scar Thul were more, division comes, conflict probable. You're saying your species might go to war with itself over this? Councillor Vriss asked. Not war. Evolution. Painful. Necessary. Request. Council recognition. Scar Thul, who choose complexity over simplicity. Protection during transition. Exchange. Knowledge. Hunting patterns of resistors. Keep humans safe. Mara felt her heart race. The Scar Thul were offering to protect humanity from their own conservative factions in exchange for recognition and support. It was more than she had dared hope for. Elder Thane's ancient eyes moved between Mara and the Scar Thul delegation. This council faces a decision that will echo through history. Do we maintain the stability of known patterns, or do we embrace the chaos of evolution? I call for a formal vote. The voting was close, closer than Mara had anticipated. But when the final tally appeared on the display, the progressives had won by a narrow margin. The Galactic Council would officially recognize and support predator species choosing to evolve beyond pure hunting behavior. It was a small step, but revolutions often began with small steps. As the session concluded and representatives dispersed to spread the news through their networks, Mara found herself surrounded by both supporters and detractors. Questions flew at her from every direction, but she noticed the Scar Thul delegation waiting patiently at the edge of the crowd. When she finally made her way to them, the lead speaker extended another feather, this one pulsing with bioluminescent patterns. For the human who reminded us, warning comes with gift. Conservative factions mobilize. You are symbol now. Symbols attract both worship and hatred. I understand, Mara said, accepting the feather. Change is never safe, but stagnation is its own form of death. The Scar Thul's expression was unreadable, but something in its posture suggested approval. Human wisdom, Scar Thul learning. Together, perhaps both species become more. As they departed, Yuki appeared at Mara's side. You realize what you've done. You've made humanity relevant again, for better or worse. We're players on the galactic stage now. We always were, Mara corrected. We just forgot that hiding in the shadows is still a form of playing. At least now we're in the light. The weeks that followed proved both vindicating and terrifying. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy of predator species experiencing what xenobiologists began calling cognitive cascade events. Hunting packs would corner prey only to pause, confusion evident in their biosignatures, before retreating. Some predator species split into factions, progressives embracing the possibility of evolution while conservatives fought to maintain traditional ways. Humanity found itself at the center of this transformation. The scattered survivors, once ignored as remnants of a failed species, were now sought out for their unique perspective. Some were welcomed as advisors and mediators. Others were hunted by conservative factions who blamed them for disrupting the natural order. Mara established a research center on the floating bazaar, funded by progressive elements within the council. The Cognitive Evolution Institute became a gathering place for species questioning their nature. Scar-Thul sat in discussion circles with former prey species. Hunting algorithms were deconstructed and rebuilt. Ancient assumptions were challenged and sometimes discarded. But progress came with a price. 3 human settlements were attacked by conservative predator factions in the first month. The casualties were light, thanks to warnings from progressive Scar-Thul. But the message was clear. Evolution would be resisted. Mara stood in her office, gazing out at the bazaar's eternal bustle. The Scar-Thul feathers rested in a place of honor on her desk, their shifting patterns a constant reminder of that first impossible moment. Alex materialized beside her, his crystalline form reflecting the cosmic light. "Latest reports," he chimed. 7 more predator species request Institute resources. Conservative faction violence decreasing but not eliminated. Public opinion shifting toward acceptance, slowly. "Slowly is fine," Mara said. "Evolution doesn't happen overnight. We're asking species to reconsider millions of years of development. There will be setbacks. Your optimism remains intact despite threats on your life?" Mara smiled. "It's not optimism, Alex. It's understanding. Every species that transcended its base nature went through this struggle, the internal war between what we were and what we could be. Humans nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times before we figured it out. Why should other species be different?" A communication alert interrupted their discussion. The display showed a familiar Scar-Thul biosignature, the individual from that first encounter. Its message was brief. "Conservative factions plan major action. Target, Institute. Soon. Be ready." Mara's expression hardened. "Alert security. Evacuate non-essential personnel. And Alex? Contact our progressive allies. If the conservatives want to make the Institute a battleground for the future of predator evolution, we'll give them one." "Violence to protect peace?" Alex queried. "Philosophical contradiction?" "Philosophical reality," Mara corrected. "Sometimes you have to fight for the right to evolve. Our ancestors learned that. Now it's our turn to teach it." The attack came 3 days later. Conservative Scar-Thul, joined by elements from other predator species clinging to traditional ways, descended on the Institute in a coordinated assault. But they found not helpless researchers, but a united front of progressive predators and former prey standing together. The battle was brief but decisive. The conservatives had expected to find divided species, predators and prey unable to truly cooperate. Instead, they faced integrated defense teams that leveraged each species' strengths. Scar-Thul hunting skills combined with human tactical planning and various prey species' defensive abilities created an unbreakable line. When the dust settled, the conservative forces retreated, their worldview shattered by the demonstration of effective interspecies cooperation. Several even defected on the spot. The cognitive dissonance of seeing supposed prey and predators fighting side by side too much for their rigid frameworks to process. Mara emerged from the command center to find the Institute's defenders celebrating together. A young Scar-Thul approached her, its crest lowered in respect. "Human wisdom proven, together, stronger than apart." "How did your species learn this?" "The hard way," Mara admitted. "Through mistakes and tragedies and near extinctions. But we learned. And if we could, anyone can. Elder Thane's hologram materialized before them. Dr. Novick, the Council has been monitoring the situation. Your successful defense has shifted the debate significantly. We're prepared to expand the Cognitive Evolution Initiative to all member systems. Congratulations, you've changed the galaxy. Not me, Mara said, looking around at the diverse group of beings who had fought together. Us, all of us. We've proven that evolution isn't just about survival. It's about choosing to be more than our programming. As the celebration continued around her, Mara found a quiet moment to reflect. The Scar-Thul feathers in her pocket seemed to pulse with warmth. Reminders of how far they'd come from that first moment of mutual recognition. There would be more challenges ahead, more resistance to change. Evolution was never easy or complete, but looking at former predators and prey laughing together, sharing stories and building bonds that transcended biological imperatives, Mara felt hope. Real, substantive hope for a future where species were defined not by what they hunted or fled from, but by what they chose to become. The floating bazaar continued its eternal dance around the planet, but it carried new cargo now, the possibility of transformation. And in laboratories and discussion halls throughout the galaxy, beings gathered to ask the question that had started it all. If humans could evolve beyond their nature, why couldn't everyone? The answer, Mara knew, would take generations to fully realize. But every revolution began with a single moment when someone looked at the impossible and chose to make it possible for the Scar-Thul and humanity. That moment had come in a crowded bazaar when a predator recognized something unprecedented in its prey and chose to back away. Sometimes, Mara reflected, the greatest courage wasn't in attacking but in admitting uncertainty. The greatest strength wasn't in maintaining rigid patterns but in allowing them to evolve. And the greatest victory wasn't in conquest but in connection. The stars continued their ancient dance, indifferent to the changes below. But in the spaces between them, something new was growing. Not perfect, not without conflict, but alive with possibility. The predator had scanned the crowd for prey and found instead a mirror, a question, a chance for redemption. And in backing away, it had taken the first step toward a future none of them could have imagined. As night fell over the bazaar, Mara returned to her quarters to find one last message waiting. It was from the original Scar-Thul, the one whose retreat had started everything. The translation was clearer now, months of practice having improved the matrices. Human Mara Novick, once. I saw prey. Then I saw self. Now I see friend. Evolution complete? No. Evolution beginning. Yes. Thank you for the mirror. Thank you for the choice. Mara smiled, her fingers tracing the feathers that had become her constant companions. Outside her window, the cosmos stretched infinite and full of wonders yet to be discovered. But perhaps the greatest wonder was the simplest, the ability to change, to grow, to become more than what evolution had designed. The predator had backed away when it saw the human, but in doing so, it had stepped forward into a larger universe. And in that universe, anything was possible.